One and done. Geronimo Mayo's tenure on the Patriots sideline lasting all of one season. He was fired after the Patriots Week 18 win over Buffalo, a win that knocked them out of the #1 pick in April's draft. Mayo is one of 5 NFL coaches to be let go so far this season. Let's go ahead and bring in our NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. And Jonathan, this seemed real quick. Right after the game, the Patriots released a statement releasing Geronimo Mayo. What went into that decision, and what's next for New England?
Yeah, quite a lengthy statement to have been written so quickly after the end of the game, right? Clearly this was something that had been on the minds of Jonathan and Robert Kraft for some time. And what I've been able to determine over the past 24 or so hours is that obviously we knew that Geronimo Mayo was not on firm and solid footing there in New England. He had been the coach in waiting contract-wise for a year. Go back to the 2022 season. There were teams that wanted to interview Mayo, then a position coach with the Patriots, and Robert Kraft didn't want to lose him. And so he updated the contract to write in that he would be the coach in waiting after Bill Belichick's departure. We know, of course, that happened last year. There's no search for a head coach. Mayo is elevated automatically and contractually to that head coach position. And look, we knew that this was a Patriots team. Talent-wise, they weren't going to be very good. There have been so many misses in the draft, misses in free agency. There was not a chance that this was going to be a roster from a talent perspective that was going to be anywhere close to the top half of the NFL. One would argue it was in the bottom 3 of the NFL. Still, though, Geronimo Mayo with a number of public gaffes throughout, right, in the media, where you can go back to the preseason where he said, hey, Drake May has outplayed Jacoby Brissett, and then in week 1 starts Jacoby Brissett. You can go as late as 2 weeks ago when he said in the pregame interview that it was going to be Antonio Gibson getting the start at running back, and then it was Ramondre Stevenson, and a whole bunch of stuff in between there. And so as I understand it, over the last couple of weeks, the Crafts were not feeling comfortable and confident either with his preparation or his plan and vision for the future to make things better. We knew that if they did retain Geronimo Mayo, that he was going to have some more experience on his coaching staff. And speaking of that coaching staff, everyone else remains under contract technically in 2025. But make no mistake about it, the New England Patriots will certainly have a lot of fresh faces there in the coaching roles. I would anticipate we're going to learn more about what's going on in New England, and certainly their #1 pick for a head coach will be the guy who was inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame last year. It would be Mike Vrabel. That is a name you're going to hear plenty and often in New England and certainly across the league. We will see if they can land him.
It seems like that's just the match made in heaven at this point. But let's move on to Jacksonville, where the breaking news this morning was Doug Pederson was let go. He became the 5th head coach to be fired in this coaching cycle here. What went wrong for Doug Pederson in Jacksonville? What does that job now look like?
So what went wrong is that they never improved off of that playoff season in his first year. Go back to when he took over after that failed Urban Meyer experiment. Really resurrected that franchise. They were able to get that stunning playoff victory against the Chargers in the wild card round. And they never built off of that, right? They lose Jim Bob Cooter there on the offensive side, and they just couldn't get things together. And the offense got worse in successive years. Then, of course, you had the injuries, certainly to Christian Kirk, but then, of course, to Trevor Lawrence. And he tried to make some changes to his coaching staff. You know, so I think a lot of people around the league would say maybe he scapegoated the defense and didn't do enough to the offensive coaching staff last offseason, 12 months ago. And so this defensive staff didn't do much better than the old one. And so a team that wasn't really going anywhere, these Jaguars, Shad Khan determining that he needed to move on from Doug Pederson, not at all a surprise to anyone who has been in that building, but a surprise to some people, and certainly a lot of people outside the building, is that the Jaguars are retaining general manager Trent Baalke. There's going to be a new structure there where the head coach is going to report to Shad Khan, as well as the GM Trent Baalke reporting to the owner Shad Khan. But they're going to be looking for a new head coach, certainly someone who can get Trevor Lawrence right and they can get back to winning the AFC South like they have done twice in the past 8 years.
And Jonathan, some news out of the state of Ohio. Cincinnati, the Bengals, who nearly snuck into the playoffs, they end up firing their defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo. Was it just the drop-off in defense? Because this is a guy who I remember was getting some head coaching looks just a couple years ago, it seemed like.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He was deep in the process with the Arizona Cardinals to ultimately be their head coach before they went with Jonathan Gannon. Lou Anarumo has been fired, according to sources. It's not a surprise for anyone in Cincinnati. That was the way things had been trending really for the last second half of the season. I'm also told a number of defensive coaches will also not be retained, will be let go. So you're going to see a lot of new defensive coaches for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'll say this, one about Lou Anarumo. You mentioned, of course, him being a head coach candidate not that long ago. This is also a guy that every single year has his defense ready to play Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs tougher, tighter, better than almost anyone else in the NFL. So something to be said about that. Also, the Cincinnati Bengals, as far as defense goes, you have to be concerned about what they are going to look like moving forward. We know that they want to earmark money for Jamar Chase, for T. Higgins, both of whom have been very vocal and not shy about saying they want to be back and back together in Cincinnati. The Bengals don't really have a lot of cash flow, and they've already paid Joe Burrow. And Trey Hendrickson, who just led the NFL in sacks, is certainly due for a new contract. Remember, he had a trade request last year. And so when you start adding up all of those things and all the issues that the Cincinnati Bengals defense has had from a talent and resource perspective, where is the money going to come from to help aid that defense? Yeah, the offense looks good, but whoever your next defensive coordinator ultimately is taking over for Lou Anarumo when they make that search, I am wondering, and a number of folks that I talked to are wondering, where are they going to find the talent to bring on to the Cincinnati Bengals defensively?
All right, let's move over to the Browns real quick. About 30 seconds, Jonathan. What's the latest with quarterback Deshaun Watson there?
Yeah, so during some medical checks on Sunday, the Browns understood and learned that Deshaun Watson suffered a setback after his October Achilles surgery. He ruptured his Achilles on the field. He had surgery in October. They were hopeful he would be ready for week 1. He's had a setback. They don't yet know the timeline, but certainly the timeline has been pushed back. This does not change necessarily the Browns' plans at quarterback. They picked number 2 in April's draft. They hadn't been relying on Deshaun Watson to be fully healthy in week 1, but it is significant that he has suffered a setback, and they will continue to learn more. And obviously, we'll get you those details when we can.
All right, and yeah, of course, sitting at that number 2 spot, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward sitting there for him if they want it. Jonathan Jones, our lead NFL insider, thanks so much. Don't forget, Sundays, noon, NFL Today. The guys get you ready for all the playoff action.